My parents left me alone in the ICU to go celebrate my brother's birthday. I thought I was just a burden until the police showed up and revealed I was a kidnapped child from 30 years ago. Then a billionaire walked in and knelt in front of me. Can you imagine calling your own parents, desperate for help after a life-altering accident, only for them to hang up with a cold, dismissive sentence? "We can't do anything for you"? What if that wasn't even the cruelest part, but just the beginning of a truth that would shatter everything you thought you knew about your life? For over 30 years, I lived a lie, and the people who swore they loved me were the architects of my deception. My name is Wyatt Dempsey, or at least, that's what I thought it was for 3 decades. I'm not usually one to share, but if you're here, I guess I owe you the truth. 2 years ago, my entire world imploded, proving that sometimes the worst things happen not to destroy you, but to force you to face a truth, no matter how brutal. My story started, like many do, in a rundown corner of South Rockford, Illinois. My apartment was nothing special: tiny, greasy kitchen, a bed by a window overlooking the highway. Every morning, 5 a.m., navy blue coveralls, hard hat on, and off to Rockford Metal Works. Machinist. My job was simple: operate the steel press, inspect, keep things running. I was the quiet type. Never complained, never made waves. Work was my escape, a way to keep my mind numb, away from thoughts of family or whatever passed for it. My paycheck? Barely enough for rent, gas, necessities. The rest, every single extra dime, went to my parents in Beloit, Wisconsin. My father, Carl Dempsey, was 63, retired. Lived in a neat 2-story house with a white picket fence. He was a stone-cold man. "A man has to pull himself up. Don't expect help from anyone," he'd bark. I lived by those words. But I often wondered if he ever saw me as a son or just a burden. My mother, Lorraine, 59, ran a home goods store. Neighbors adored her: kind, capable, bright smile. To me, she was an enigma. Her eyes always made me feel like I owed her something, like my very existence was a debt she had to bear. I kept trying, hoping one day that weight would lift from her gaze. And then there was Cole, my younger brother, 3 years my junior. Cole. He was the golden child. Tall, charming, always laughing, spending money like water. He couldn't hold a job for 3 months, but whatever Cole wanted, they gave him. A new car? Dad signed the check. Gambling debt? Mom quietly paid it off. Me? I was still driving the same beat-up truck from high school, every penny I earned just barely keeping my life afloat. Nothing in that family was fair. Ever. I still remember those family dinners. Cole would ramble about some half-baked business idea, and my parents would glow, nodding, praising him like he'd invented the wheel. Me? I could talk about busting my ass, working a month of overtime to fix a crucial machine at the factory, and my father would give a half-hearted nod, while my mother's eyes would cut right through me, silently asking, "What's that supposed to prove?" I learned to stay quiet, to swallow the words, to just wish the meal would end. That favoritism, it wasn't just unfair, it was a constant, small knife twisting inside me. I used to think if I worked harder, was better, they'd finally see me. But the older I got, the more I understood. No matter what I did, I was just a faint shadow. Cole was the sun, and I was just there to fill the background. Invisible. That afternoon, the rain was relentless, drumming a grim beat on the factory's tin roof. My last shift. I was inspecting an old steel press, the one that had been acting up. My coworker, Jimmy, shouted something about being done, but I had a bad feeling. Something was off. I leaned in, reached into the machine, just for a second, to dislodge a jammed steel rod. And then, everything exploded. A sharp crack, a deafening roar. The machine lunged to life, the steel shaft spinning like a hungry beast. I barely had time to register what was happening, barely time to scream, before it felt like my right arm was being devoured. The pain. Oh, God, the pain. So intense, it stole my breath, shattered my thoughts. I collapsed, blood gushing, pooling red on the cold concrete floor. Coworkers' shouts faded into a distant echo, and I sank into a black, nightmarish abyss. When I finally clawed my way back to consciousness, blinding white lights seared my eyes. The metallic tang of antiseptic filled my nose. The steady, incessant beep 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 of a heart monitor drilled into my ears. I was in a hospital bed, my body heavy, my right arm numb, encased in tight, white bandages. A doctor, his face serious, explained, "Wyatt, you had a serious accident. Your right arm is badly fractured, nerve and muscle damage. Without surgery, soon, you could lose the ability to use it." I heard him, but one question screamed louder. How much will this cost? My entire world felt like it was crumbling. My arm throbbed, a constant, sickening reminder that every passing second brought me closer to losing my ability to work, the only thing keeping me afloat. No insurance. No savings. Just them. Carl and Lorraine. My parents. My last, desperate flicker of hope. Despite years of feeling like an outsider, I still believed that now, with my arm nearly crushed, they wouldn't turn their backs on me. I took a shaky breath, pain searing through me with every movement, and reached for the phone. I dialed their number, the one for the house in Bloit, each slow, drawn-out ring pulling me deeper into an abyss. My mother answered. Her voice, soft yet chillingly cold, like she was speaking to a bank clerk, not her injured son. "Wyatt, what's wrong?" I tried to keep my voice steady, my heart hammering. "Mama, I had an accident at the factory. My arm, it's badly injured. The surgery, it costs a lot. I need help." I paused, desperately waiting. For a question. For comfort. Anything. But there was only a vast, terrifying silence. Then she spoke, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "I'll talk to your father. Wait for us to get back to you." And then she hung up. Just like that. "No, are you okay? No, are you in pain?" Nothing. I clutched the phone, staring at the dark screen. Asterisk, get back to you. Asterisk, the words echoed, fragile as a promise I already knew would never be kept. But I waited. I had to. I told myself they were just figuring things out, driving here already. I pictured Mom rushing in, taking my hand. Dad, giving me a reassuring pat. I clung to that image, even as I knew, deep down, it was a distant, dying dream. Time crawled. 1 hour. 2. The phone stayed silent. The next morning, still nothing. I tried to rationalize it. Dad hated being bothered. Mom had the store. But as the sun climbed, its harsh light burning through the window, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. My hand shaking, I dialed my father's number. 3 rings. He picked up. Wyatt, his voice, gruff, filled with that familiar irritation I'd known my whole life. "What is it?" I forced the words out, trying to keep my voice from breaking. "Dad, I had an accident. My arm's badly hurt. I can't afford this. I need your help. Mom's help." I paused, holding my breath. His response was instant, sharp and cold, like a knife plunging into my chest. "Don't bother us. We're too old to help." And he hung up. No explanation. No hesitation. Just gone. I stared at the phone, its black screen swallowing the last, fragile shred of hope I had. It felt like an invisible fist was crushing my ribs, stealing the air from my lungs. I wanted to scream. To call back. To demand why. But I couldn't. I just sat there, silent. A part of me died that day, right there in that sterile hospital room. Later that afternoon, trying to distract myself from the gnawing pain, I scrolled through my phone. And then I saw it. A social media post from Cole, my golden brother. A photo, the whole family, beaming, gathered around a huge birthday cake, candles glowing. His caption, "Happy birthday, Dad. Family is everything." I stared at each familiar, joyful face. It felt like a physical blow, a knife twisting deeper into the wound. They were celebrating. Laughing. While I lay here, broken, alone, with a crushed arm and a mountain of debt. I wasn't in that photo. I was never part of that joy. Never truly part of their family. I turned off the phone, tossing it to the foot of the bed. The pain in my arm was nothing compared to the desolation swallowing me whole. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. Just sat there, listening to the rain, its steady patter a mournful song mirroring my life. a string of shattered hopes, of cold glances from the people I called family. Memories flooded back then. I was maybe 5 or 6 in the kitchen. Mom cooking, the scent of mashed potatoes. I'd carefully set the table, hoping for praise. She'd glance at me, a faint smile, then, "Wyatt, why are you so slow? You should have finished ages ago." Sweet voice, sharp words. A constant reminder I was always falling short. Dad? He rarely spoke, but every word was a stone. Never talked to me, only gave orders. "Wyatt, clean the garage. Wyatt, fix the car. Wyatt, don't waste my time." I obeyed, because any delay would freeze the entire room with his gaze. Once, I spilled a glass of water. Just water. Dad roared, "Foolish. Can't you do anything right?" He made me kneel in the cold garage for 3 hours, shivering, surrounded by oil fumes, not daring to cry. But Cole? Oh, when Cole messed up, it was fine. He broke Mom's favorite vase. She'd laugh, ruffle his hair. "It's okay, sweetheart." He lost a new bike. Dad shrugged, bought him another. Cole was the incandescent light in that house. I was just a faint shadow, trying desperately not to be noticed, not to be blamed. In high school, I had this dream. Football. Running on the field, hearing cheers, feeling like I finally belonged. When I told Mom, she just gave that faint, cold laugh. "Football? That's for kids from well-off families, Wyatt. You should get a job at the auto shop. Earn some money." I didn't argue. What was the point? So, I spent my afternoons after school, hands stained with grease, while Cole went off to college, fully funded. My parents boasted to relatives. He was the pride of the family. I kept trying. Fixed their plumbing, mowed the lawn, repainted the fence. Just once, I craved a "thank you," a nod of approval. But Dad remained silent. Mom's glances still said my efforts were obligations, not worthy of praise. I learned to endure. To swallow the bitter disappointment, telling myself someday they'd see me. Truly see me as their son. The most searing memory? My high school graduation. I stood on the porch, diploma in hand, a mix of pride and desperate hope. I'd worked so hard. But from inside, loud music blared. Cole's party. Laughter spilled out. No one came. No one cared about my diploma. I stood under the dim streetlight, my shadow long and lonely. The night air was cold, but not as cold as the crushing loneliness in my heart. Here, in this sterile hospital bed, those memories weren't just flooding back, they were a sentence, passed long ago. I was never truly their son. Never. What I called family was just an empty, echoing shell. And I, for 30 years, had been trying to fill it with futile hopes. Days blurred into a haze. My father's curt words, "Don't bother us," echoed, a death knell. The phone lay silent, a useless monument to abandonment. My arms still throbbed, but the physical pain was a dull ache compared to the cavernous emptiness in my heart. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to simply not think. That morning, faint sunlight stretched across the white-tiled floor. The nurse came, changed my bandages. I gritted my teeth, enduring. Then, the door swung open. Not a nurse. 2 men. Stern. Composed. Dressed like they meant serious business. They introduced themselves as agents from the FBI and Rockford PD. My heart hammered. What now? I thought they were here about the factory accident. But the older agent's eyes held something unsettling. "You're Wyatt Dempsey, correct?" he asked, his voice deep. I nodded, trying to appear calm, but a storm was brewing inside. They confirmed my basic information. Then the younger agent slid a thick stack of documents onto the table. His voice was oddly calm. "Mr. Wyatt, we're here to discuss an issue regarding your DNA records." DNA? My mind raced. What had I done? My throat tightened. The older agent continued, "When the hospital sent your blood sample to federal health authorities for insurance verification, your DNA was automatically scanned through the National Identification System. And it matched the profile of a child abduction case from over 30 years ago in New York." The world stopped. Abduction? New York? My head snapped back. "You must be mistaken," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. "I was born in Rockford. My parents are Carl and Lorraine Dempsey. This This has nothing to do with New York. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened his folder, pulled out a sheet of paper, and slid it toward me. It was a black and white photo. A boy maybe 2 years old. Big brown eyes. Curly, tousled hair. An innocent, playful smile. I stared at it. My heart froze. That face. It was me. Exactly me as a child. I'd seen the rare, faded photos Mom kept. But this wasn't from her album. Below the photo, bold text screamed, Wiener Whitmore, missing son of businessman Nathaniel Whitmore and his wife Vivian Whitmore. My blood felt like it had turned to ice. Wiener Whitmore. The younger agent spoke again, his voice gentle but firm. Your biological parents, Nathaniel and Vivian, submitted DNA samples years ago, hoping to find their son. After nearly 3 decades, through federal database matching, your blood sample is a perfect match to their profile. I couldn't breathe. My mind was blank, save for one repeating, horrifying sentence. So, for 30 years, I've been living in a family that isn't mine? I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as a cruel joke. But their serious faces, their somber eyes, left no room for doubt. They weren't lying. They weren't mistaken. The older man handed me another sheet, asking for consent for a second DNA test. My hand shook so badly the pen smeared the ink as I signed. I needed answers. No matter how terrifying. As they left, he paused. They've been waiting for you for a long time, he said, his voice softening. When the door clicked shut, I sat there, clutching a business card. The steady beep of the heart monitor was a distant hum. Nathaniel Whitmore. Vivian Whitmore. Names so foreign, yet tied to me by an invisible, terrifying thread. All those years. The cold glares. The fake smiles. The feeling I never belonged. It all made a horrifying sense. I hadn't belonged. I was never truly a Dempsey. I had never belonged to them. The next morning, Mr. James Hartley, the Whitmore family lawyer, confirmed it. Mr. Wyatt, he said, his voice grave, the second DNA test is absolute. You are Wiener Whitmore, the long-lost son of Nathaniel and Vivian Whitmore. No margin of error. He slid a document across the table. Probability of match, 99.999%. Wiener Whitmore. That was me. Yet, it still felt unreal. Nathaniel Whitmore has been informed, Hartley continued. He's on his way from New York. He's eager to meet you. My real father. A man I never knew existed. I felt like I was teetering on a cliff's edge. Later that afternoon, the door opened again. This time, it wasn't a doctor or a lawyer. It was an older man, silver-haired, wearing a solemn wool coat. His deep brown eyes, brimming with a lifetime of emotion, found mine. Wiener, he whispered, his voice catching. Nathaniel Whitmore. My biological father. He sat beside my bed, hands clasped, trying to rein in decades of pain and hope. I wanted to call him Dad, but the word choked in my throat. He was a stranger. Yet, his eyes, they spoke a language I was just beginning to understand. Then, Mr. Hartley, standing quietly in the corner, began to speak. And his words tore apart everything I thought I knew about my life. 30 years ago, when I, Wiener Whitmore, was just 2 years old, I was kidnapped from my family's home in Albany, New York. 3 days later, the first ransom call. $500,000. Nathaniel and Vivian paid. I wasn't returned. 6 months later, another call. $1 million. They paid again, clinging to the desperate hope I was alive. 2 years after that, a third demand, $1.5 million. $3 million extorted from my parents, all while I remained missing. The kidnappers threatened to kill me if the police were involved, so my real parents acted in agonizing secrecy. By the time authorities finally stepped in, all traces were erased. The case became one of New York's longest-standing missing persons cases. No one ever expected I was still alive. And then Mr. Hartley dropped the bomb. The FBI has identified the kidnappers. They were Carl and Lorraine Dempsey. The people you've called your parents for 30 years. My blood ran cold. Carl. The man who barked orders. Lorraine. The woman with her fake smile, her disdainful glances. They had worked for the Whitmore family, Carl as a security guard, Lorraine as a part-time housekeeper. They knew the family's routines intimately. After taking the money, they fled New York, changed identities, forged a birth certificate for me, Wyatt Dempsey, born in Illinois. With those fake papers, I was enrolled in school, raised as a normal child. No one suspected a thing. For nearly 3 decades, I sat there utterly stunned. Each word was a knife, slicing into my heart. The people I called my parents, the ones who had just abandoned me in this hospital, were the ones who had stolen me. They didn't just take my childhood, they built an entire lie to cover their crime. Every cold glance, every insult, every moment I felt like I didn't belong. It all made horrifying, agonizing sense now. They didn't love me because I wasn't their son. I was just a commodity. A dangerous secret they had to keep hidden. I looked at Nathaniel, my real father, sitting there, his eyes red, struggling for composure. "We never stopped looking for you," he said, his voice raw. "Every day for 30 years, your mother, and I prayed you were still alive." I wanted to comfort him, but all I felt was a storm, anger, pain, and an emptiness so profound I couldn't even name it. Weeks later, I was finally discharged. My arm, still in a cast, was a constant ache. But my body was stable. Nathaniel was a steady presence. He arranged everything, private doctors, covered costs. He never pressured me to call him Dad. He just was there. Patient. He understood I needed time to digest this impossible truth. But the storm inside me? It raged. Memories of Carl's glares, Lorraine's fake smiles, their cruel words, they haunted me. I needed to confront them. Not for forgiveness, not for vengeance, but for answers. For my truth. One morning, I looked at Nathaniel. "I want to see them," I said, my voice hoarse. "Carl and Lorraine. I need to hear their reasons." He met my gaze, a flicker of surprise, then a firm nod. "All right, Wiener. I'll go with you." He called me by my real name. I didn't correct him. That felt significant. We drove to Bloit. The familiar golden cornfields, the weathered billboards. But it all felt alien. I wasn't Wyatt Dempsey returning home. I was Wiener Whitmore, a stranger, confronting his past. The car stopped. The 2-story house. The white picket fence, peeling paint. The wooden steps, creaking under my feet. Every brick held a memory. Not warm ones. Memories of lonely nights on the porch, a diploma no one acknowledged. Dinners where I was a ghost. Years spent yearning for love, receiving only disdain. My heart hammered as I knocked. The door opened. Lorraine. She froze. Her eyes widened, as if she'd seen a ghost. "Wyatt," she whispered, her voice trembling. Before I could speak, Carl appeared, his eyes weary, as cold as ever. But this time, I didn't look away. I met their gaze. And for the first time, I saw it, a flicker of fear. We entered the living room. The air was suffocatingly thick, each tick of the wall clock an eternity. Nathaniel spoke first, calm, firm. "I'm sure you remember me. Nathaniel Whitmore. I'm here only to hear the truth." He didn't threaten. He didn't accuse. But his words carried an undeniable weight. They sat in silence for what felt like forever. I looked around, at the dining table, the bookshelf I once fixed. Familiar, yet utterly foreign. Then Carl spoke, his voice stripped of its usual harshness. "We didn't have a choice." Nathaniel simply placed the FBI documents on the table. Undeniable proof. Carl's shoulders slumped. He began his confession. The kidnapping, the 3 ransom demands, the $3 million. They'd planned it meticulously, using their intimate knowledge of my real family. After taking the money, they fled, changed identities, forged my birth certificate. Lorraine started to sob, trembling. She claimed she'd cared for me out of fear of Carl being exposed. But over time, she saw her own guilt in my face, a guilt too heavy to bear. So she became cold, disdainful. Carl saw me as proof of his crime, a dangerous liability he had to hide. I listened, detached. Each word they spoke peeled back layers of my childhood, revealing the raw, cruel truth. I was a tool. A secret. A lie. I stood up, my voice low, steady. If you had ever truly loved me, you would have told the truth long ago. Instead, you let me live in a lie. Lorraine lunged forward, trying to embrace me, but I recoiled. Carl just bowed his head. Nathaniel stood behind me, a silent, unwavering pillar of strength. The tension was unbearable. Then, outside, tires screeched. Blaring sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the window. Carl flinched, panic contorting his face, the first time I'd ever seen his hardness break. Lorraine's face went white. I stood silent. This was inevitable. Nathaniel remained calm. Federal agents burst in. Commands echoed. Flashlights cut through the room. Carl and Lorraine, criminals, stood against Nathaniel and me, a father who had waited 30 years and a son whose childhood was stolen. Lorraine's sobs intensified, her eyes searching mine, begging for sympathy. But I felt nothing. No anger. No pity. Just a cold, echoing void. The agents read the warrant: kidnapping, extortion, identity fraud. I watched numb as Carl and Lorraine were handcuffed. Lorraine collapsing into a chair, her sobs broken. They were the people who taught me to hold a hammer, who cooked my dinners. My family. Now, they were criminals, led away under flashing lights. I felt no relief, no sorrow. Just that profound void, like a part of me had been erased. At the FBI office, Carl remained silent, a blank slate. Lorraine, however, was a torrent of excuses, claiming she only followed him, that things got out of hand. I didn't want to hear it. Her excuses couldn't change the truth. They stole me, built their lives on lies, and abandoned me when I was most vulnerable. The investigators confirmed Carl and Lorraine would be prosecuted in New York. Life in prison. I listened numb. Just wanted to escape the confessions, the evidence, the suffocating memories. In the hallway, I sat on a cold wooden bench, staring at the flashing red and blue lights outside. Relief? Grief? Still just emptiness. Nathaniel sat beside me, silent, gently placing a hand on my shoulder. He understood. I had lost everything, past and present, in a single, devastating day. He quietly told the investigators he'd handle everything. He wouldn't put more pressure on me. I looked at him, a wave of gratitude mixed with profound unfamiliarity. He was my father. But the words still wouldn't form on my tongue. In the days that followed, my story became a national sensation. Wyatt Dempsey was officially erased, replaced by Weiner Whitmore, my true name, plastered across headlines. Child missing for 30 years found, they screamed. To them, a miracle. To me, each headline was a knife, reminder of the stolen years. Nathaniel stayed in Bloit, renting a quiet hotel room. He never pushed. He just was. There each morning with coffee, sharing snippets about Albany, about his own father. We were two strangers, patiently learning each other's contours. One afternoon, bathed in the golden glow of sunset, Nathaniel asked, "Do you want to go to New York? Your mother and sister are waiting." I hesitated, watching dry leaves swirl outside. New York. The Whitmore family. A foreign world. But I knew. I had to face it. Not just them, but myself. I nodded. Yes, I managed. I want to meet them. Nathaniel's smile was faint but warm. He laid a hand on my shoulder. A brief touch. But in that moment, I felt the immense gap between us begin to close. 2 days later, we flew to Albany. The car wound through tree-lined streets, past grand houses. Everything felt alien, yet strangely, deeply familiar, as if I was traveling back to where my life truly began. The iron gates swung open. A magnificent old house. Dark tiled roof, ivy-covered walls. My legs felt like lead. Nathaniel walked beside me, his silent presence an anchor. The front door opened. Vivian Whitmore. My biological mother. She stood on the porch, eyes wide, disbelieving. Time stopped. Her eyes were Nathaniel's, the lines on her face etched with years of sorrow. And then, the tears came. She rushed forward, engulfing me in a fierce hug. I stood rigid at first, stunned. Then, instinctively, I tightened my arms around her. We cried. uncontrollably. Her trembling fingers traced my face, memorizing every feature, as if to make up for 30 years of absence. "Wiener," she choked out. "My son." For the first time in my life, I felt the true, overwhelming warmth of family. Something I had never, ever known. Nathaniel stood nearby, silent tears streaming down his face. His wife was finally embracing their son. Then, from the staircase, another woman. Violet, my biological sister. Her hands trembled, her eyes hesitant. She approached, placing a hand on my bandaged arm, and then she, too, broke down. We hugged. Two siblings reunited by a miracle, yet separated by a chasm of lost time. Inside, family photos lined the walls. Vivian, her voice still trembling, led me to a small room. "I never cleared it out," she said. "Every week I cleaned it, as if you might come back any moment." A little wooden toy car. A green wool blanket. An old family photo. I sank to my knees, touching the toy, and wept. Tears for a stolen childhood. That evening, our first meal together in 30 years. No fanfare. Just flickering candlelight and tear-filled eyes. I listened to Violet's laughter, Vivian's stories, Nathaniel's steady voice. Trying to etch every moment into my memory, terrified it would vanish like a dream. At the end, Vivian gripped my hand. "Nothing can make up for the years we lost," she whispered. "But we'll spend the rest of our lives trying." Nathaniel looked at us, his eyes shining with both profound joy and lingering sorrow. I just nodded. The pain inside me hadn't vanished. But for the first time, I felt I truly had a place to call home. The trial. A national spectacle. Wyatt Dempsey was officially erased, replaced by Wiener Whitmore. Each headline a fresh cut. I sat in the gallery, silent, detached. Carl had bowed, an empty shell. Lorraine, sobbing, wiping away endless tears. I looked at them, but felt nothing. No hatred, no pity. Just a profound, crushing void. The court laid bare the investigation. Carl, mastermind, siphoning 10 million through fake accounts. Lorraine, accomplice, raising me in a web of lies. Kidnapping, extortion, identity fraud. Life in prison for Carl. 30 years for Lorraine. When the verdict came, Lorraine's sobs echoed, haunting the silent courtroom. Carl remained bowed. I left. Couldn't watch any longer. Outside, reporters swarmed. Microphones shoved in my face. "How do you feel about the conviction? Can you forgive them?" I took a deep breath and said, "I don't hate them anymore. I just want to live as my true self." Then I walked away, leaving the flashing cameras behind. Back in Albany, Nathaniel and Vivian offered their estate. I declined. I needed my own space, a small apartment, to process the ruins of my past. Therapy. Writing. Piecing together the fragments. Carl's glares. Lorraine's fake smiles. Nathaniel's first hug. Each word on the page was a fresh cut, but also a step toward healing. I inherited a fortune, but I lived simply. Drove my own car, cooked my own meals, worked as a technical consultant. I wasn't Wiener Whitmore heir. I was just Wiener. Standing on my own. Weekends were for family dinners. Vivian's lavish meals, Violet's stories, Nathaniel's gentle guidance through the family business. Slowly, painstakingly, I felt a connection forming. Real. One evening, on my porch, watching the city lights flicker in my coffee, it hit me. My life had come full circle. From utter darkness to fragile light. I knew I'd never forget the stolen years, the buried pain. But justice, I realized, wasn't just a prison sentence. It was the chance to live again. To be my true self. Wiener Whitmore. No longer anyone's shadow. The hardest thing, after 30 years of running from my past, wasn't forgiving them. It was forgiving myself. I picked up my notebook again. I lived 30 years in a story that wasn't mine. But perhaps, I wrote, that's what taught me the meaning of freedom. Memories poured out. The steel press. The hospital. The silent phone. Carl's cold eyes. Lorraine's deceit. Nathaniel's trembling voice calling me Wiener. Each memory a wound, but also a piece of a puzzle. Life, despite its scars, always leaves a door open. You just need the courage to step through. I wrote about forgiveness. Not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Hatred, I understood, was an invisible chain. To be free, you must let it go. Not to forget, but to move forward. Family, I learned, isn't just blood. It's where you choose to belong. Nathaniel, Vivian, Violet, they didn't try to erase my past. They walked through my pain with me. They showed me what home truly meant. I even started speaking at universities, telling my story. Sometimes I'd tell them, we can't choose where we come from, but we can always choose how we live afterward. It wasn't about boasting. It was about showing them, life, however harsh, always has an escape. Cherish the simple things. Don't let your past define you. It's where you came from, not where you have to stay. Closing the notebook at dawn, a late autumn breeze on my face, I felt lighter. I wasn't the stolen child. Not Wyatt Dempsey, living a lie. I was Wiener Whitmore, a man who had found himself. Standing there, watching the vibrant sunrise filter through the trees, it was clear. Justice isn't just a verdict. It's the truth laid bare. Love isn't just blood, but choosing to hold hands through wounds. And happiness? It's not about reclaiming what was lost, but cherishing what remains. I found light among the broken pieces. And I know, with enough courage, anyone can. So, tell me, if you found yourself in my shoes, what truth would you fight for? What kind of freedom would you seek?